Thanks very much, everyone, for spending your Friday night with us here and learning a little bit about jellyfish. And it's some of you have already said that you are excited about jellyfish or you love them already, and some of you might be a little bit unsure about jellyfish. And so my goal tonight is to make you fascinated with jellyfish. So pretty much like I am. I hope that by the end of tonight, when you see them, you're going to look at them and go, "Oh, that's amazing. Oh, I learned something about them before, and now I'm seeing it in action." And that's really what I'm hoping for tonight's goal. A bit about my background. I used to do outdoor education, and then I moved on and got more focused onto research. I started this project over a year ago now. It was back in the end of 2020, after I graduated from the master's program at the University of Hong Kong in environmental management. And I've always been kind of interested in jellyfish, but just only about then was when I had the time and the money to start this project and to get going. And so now it's been going for over a year, and just reaching out, involving people, everybody like yourselves, and trying to educate people about jellyfish. So in order to start you guys getting fascinated about jellyfish, we're gonna have to start from the beginning. Jellies have been around longer than the dinosaurs. And that's probably one of the coolest facts about them, because we think of them as just basically bags of water. And how could something like that exist for so long? 550 million years. They're considered to be one of the oldest, if not the oldest, multicellular organisms around. And it's likely that that simple body design that they have is what has helped them to do this. So if you see on the right-hand side of the screen, you've got this fossil, and this is one of those fossils that's laid down and leaving an impression. Because jellies are mostly water, we don't necessarily have the bones left behind like we see with dinosaurs and other kinds of fossils. So a lot of these fossils are going to be impressions. And what you can see from the image on the right there, that impression is remarkably similar to the body shape that we have today. There's a huge variety of shapes, of body shapes for jellyfish. There's over 200 types in just the scyphozoans and the ones that with the bells, the medusas that we think of as jellyfish. But that basic simple body plan is likely the thing that has helped them to exist for so long. So jellyfish are thought to, or are commonly portrayed in the news media as taking over the oceans, as our future is gelatinous, or jellyfish are attacking power stations, or jellyfish attacked people on a beach, these kinds of things. But this kind of perception is incorrect. The idea that jellyfish are taking over the ocean is, there's just not enough research done. There's not enough long-term data on this to determine whether this is actually correct. And in fact, I'll say that a lot, and probably when you all ask questions as well, many of the answers will probably involve some form of more research is needed, because we just don't know enough about jellyfish at this point. Also, when you're reading some of these news stories and you're thinking about jellyfish, a little bit of critical thinking is necessary. Jellyfish don't attack. They don't have brains. They're not ganging up on things and bringing them down like a pride of lions. So think about that. When you do read these stories, you got to think about that the jellyfish are not getting together. They're not attacking. They're not doing these kinds of things. So other things about jellyfish that give that perception are they can take advantage of degraded environments. So impacted environments that might be too polluted for other life forms, fish and those things, to live. Jellyfish are able to live because they are mostly water. So mostly what's in the water is inside the jellyfish as well. But a key point to note here is that just because you see jellyfish, it does not mean that the environment is bad. Jellyfish are a natural part of every environment, and you're going to see them everywhere, and they belong there. Jellyfish are in all of the world's oceans, everywhere you can find some form of jellyfish, even though they do have different ranges there. And the jellyfish typically get seen by people and get reported in the news when they show up in these large groups. So these large groups here, you might have a swarm, and this is where they're coming together for some sort of purpose. And that would be an apparent bloom. All right, so they're not actually growing the population so much, but they're just showing up in one area and people go, oh my God, there's a whole lot of jellyfish right here. Then there's an aggregation, and that might be where they're moved together by tides, by storms, and a big group of them get caught into a bay area, get pushed into a bay area, and then people see a large grouping of them, and it's of note. And the last bit is a bloom. And this true bloom, this is a rapid growth in the population and as part of their life cycle, which you see right here. So jellyfish have numerous different kinds of life cycles, and the most popular is on the side of your screen right there, but they can also clone. Some of them are hermaphrodites, so they can, some of them can just create more, and they can clone in 13 different ways, as Dr. Gershwin says here. So numerous ways jellyfish can reproduce. The most popular is on the side of your screen here, where you have the adult jellyfish. They get together into that group and release sperm and egg into the water. Those get together and start forming planula, which become polyps. Those polyps then find a hard surface to land on. Some of the hard surfaces that are very popular are things like human-made surfaces. So you might have piers, docks. The plastics on the undersides of fish farms are actually thought to be really popular. So that would be some great research to do at a different time, is to find out if jellyfish are on the bottom side of fish farms that are all over Hong Kong. So once there are those polyps, they sit and they wait for the appropriate time to do that true bloom, to do that population growth right there. And you can see those blooms would be caused by food triggers, by environmental variables. They wait for conditions to be right, and they can wait for quite some time. They can wait for over a year, depending on species. And then those polyps will separate out and they divide up. It's almost like a bunch of, and those little, and those pizzas would then, all right, we're back in here. So those pizzas would then go out and they're the little baby jellyfish. And then what they do is all they do is eat and eat and eat and become large jellyfish. And jellyfish eat up and down the food chain. So imagine this, you've got things that like to eat jellyfish, but the jellyfish is capable of eating their young. So those baby fish, jellyfish can eat them. So now there's fewer predators. Also, that fish is eating other things, but the jellyfish eats those as well with those big trailing tentacles. So the jellyfish can eat the food of its predators and can eat the young of its predators. So now there are fewer predators and there are more jellyfish. And so this is one of the ways it's possible for them to take over ecosystems. It's commonly thought, everybody thinks about turtles as being the main predator of jellyfish. However, about 167 species of jelly or of fish are known to eat jellies. And some of these are commercially important ones. Swordfish and tunas and things like that are known to eat jellyfish. So if you eat seafood, you've probably eaten stuff that eats jellyfish there. And even after they're dead, jellyfish are important because when they do these die-offs, they fall to the bottom of the sea. And then here, let's see if we can start this up. So this is what, and then creatures eat them. So some researchers, this is a short clip from researchers in Norway, and they took a large number of dead jellyfish, put them down onto the bottom of the ocean, and then videoed it. And over a 3-hour period or so, this large number of jellies was just eaten up. And I think if I remember the article correctly, at about peak time, they had over 1,000 individual animals on there eating these jellyfish. So you can see just exactly how important these jellyfish are to not only carbon cycles by pushing them down to the bottom, but also to having food for part of the food web of undersea environments there. Jellies also provide homes for things. So you can see that image on the side, you've got a bunch of fish inside the tentacles of one of the species of jellyfish that's around here, Cyanea and Ozakii. And so those fish will live inside the tentacles because other larger fish will stay away from the jellyfish, knowing that they'll get stung. And so these floating nurseries will help protect the fish as long as the fish doesn't get caught themselves. And as the fish grows and grows, sometimes even eating the jellyfish as it uses the jellyfish for protection. And then it will go off and become an adult fish there. Jellies also are known to have a symbiotic algae in here, zooxanthellae, and this is something that is also in corals, helps give them some of the colors there, where this symbiotic algae, it lives inside, and just like plants do, it will photosynthesize and then share some of the energy with its host. So the algae gets gets protection from the jellyfish, and the jellyfish gets energy from the algae there. And I'll talk about one of the species that has that later on. I'll show you some images. You can also see that all these other species of all these other creatures are known to live on jellies, eat jellies, sometimes even just it's thought that they use them for transportation, which is rather amusing. It's like catching the bus at a free trip. Jelly senses are much stronger and better than we think. You know, they're not just these silly bags of water that they might be, because the water inside them is very similar to the water that's outside of them. They're able to detect chemicals, pressure, changes in pH, salinity, all of that. And then they can make decisions where to go based on that. And these factors, salinity and pressure and temperature, can actually help limit some of the ranges of different species of jellyfish. So they're much more sensitive than we think. They also have these basic eyes, the rhopalia, along the sides. Most of these are very basic. They detect light. More advanced ones might detect movement. However, cubozoans, there's some species of cubozoans. These are the box jellies, and the box jellies are the ones that most people are afraid of. They think that their eyes might be good enough to see things and chase them and hunt them, actively hunt them. Also, they've been known to, there's an article that shared on one of the groups about jellies that were thought to be able to use trees as terrestrial navigation. So they're in the water, their eyes are good enough to look up, see trees, and then use them as landmarks for when they're moving around. Last cool feature of jellyfish senses, they have something like inside our ears. So when we move around inside our ears, we know which orientation we're in, upside down, looking, left, right. And jellyfish have something like that as well. Because they are in turbulent ocean environments, they might get tossed around by waves, winds, currents, anything like that, and would otherwise get disoriented. But these stateless, and this is just a chamber, like a hair-filled chamber inside the very edge of the bell of the jellyfish, the outside of the jellyfish, and inside is a little crystal. And as the jellyfish moves around, that crystal brushes up against the hairs on the sides of the chamber and tells you which way that jellyfish is oriented. So super cool feature, helps you keep oriented and get back on track. So some cool jellyfish facts. Jellyfish were, one species was responsible for for a Nobel Prize. Excuse me. The researcher was able to synthesize a green fluorescent protein, and you can see that mouse on the side of your screen is a promotional example of that. Usually, what this fluorescent protein is used for is in biochemical research or biomolecular research, and they inject these into cells, and then they use that fluorescence as a way of finding out the cell processes. So super cool, super intense stuff, which is why the Nobel Prize was awarded for it. They also use jellyfish collagen for scaffolding. for tissue growth. So you can form a shape, you can then grow tissue over that, and that tissue can then be put into people. And because it's a collagen, a natural collagen, it doesn't react with that tissue. There's also edible species of jellyfish. Technically, all jellyfish could be considered edible. However, not all of them have a good crunch. Not all of them have much of a flavor. I don't know if any of you eat jellyfish, but it's mostly the flavor that's on it that is the attraction. So it's a lot of it is the feel of the jellyfish. And there are experts out there who will say, you know, this jellyfish is good and this jellyfish is not so good for eating. And this is a multi-million-dollar industry. So Asia is the biggest market. China is one of the biggest markets for edible jellyfish, but this industry can stretch all the way to the Gulf of Mexico over towards the US. And species can be caught there, processed, and sent to this side of them. One of the edible species is one of the more popular ones here, in more common ones here in Hong Kong as well. So then they're also being looked at for nutritional supplements. People are looking at them, you know, jellyfish chips, these sorts of things. But since they're mostly water, there's not a ton of nutritional value to them. There are proteins and a few minerals and things, but there are other things that could be better. But people are looking to them as a potential food source because there are so many of them, and because they can proliferate so easily. It's very easy to grow lots of them really fast. So it seems like it should be a good source of food or some other use. The coolest thing, last bit here, Turritopsis. This is one of the famous jellyfish that gets called the immortal jellyfish. So not totally immortal because it can still be eaten, it can still be damaged and killed by physical processes. But if it's damaged in part of its life cycle, it can then revert some of that life cycle. It can go back to earlier stages of that life cycle, and then it can repair itself and grow back up towards the adult. This one's the famous one. Other species of jellyfish are thought to be able to do that. So these are the jellyfish right here that we are recorded as having in Hong Kong. Pelagia on the left side there. This is one of the ones that is a strong stinger. In the center, Aurelia aurita, the moon jellyfish. This is the common one that many people are very familiar with because it shows up in aquariums. It doesn't sting very much, and those four circles, those four oval gonads in the top there are a diagnostic feature. So it's really easy to see and identify. On the side, you've got Cyanea nozakii, and this one is common name is called a ghost jellyfish. Those long trailing tentacles, you can really see how it earns its name. This one's responsible for a lot of stings here in Hong Kong. It's quite common and get quite large, and those stings can pack quite a punch. Just below that, Mastidius papua. This is one of the jellyfish that has that symbiotic zooxanthellae, that symbiotic algae inside of it that I talked about earlier. So the one we're looking at is a bit brown. You can have them in yellows, greens, blues, all kinds of different colors. So pretty neat color species that we can find in different parts of Hong Kong. Then the middle one there, Stomalophilus. This one is the cannonball jelly. This is one of the edible species of jelly. It's super popular. And the last one, Acromitis, is the river jellyfish. And this one's found sometimes towards the brackish waters. People are thinking towards mangrove areas, estuarine areas, that sort of thing. A couple of things about jellies here. So you've got common names and then scientific names. And for everybody who has a scientific background, you'll be familiar with it. A lot of scientific names are in Latin because no country owns Latin, so no country owns science. So we're just using a dead language because common names can be made up for anybody, anywhere. For example, the ghost jelly, the Cyanea nozakii, here it's called the lion's mane, but other places the lion's mane is considered different species, capillata. So common names can be confusing, and that's why scientific names are generally used. Mastidius. Genetics is doing awesome things for taxonomy for all kinds of species. It's shown that what we think is Mastigius papua around here might be Alba punctatus. So would love to grab more of these, do more genetic studies on this kind of stuff. Aurelia has also been split up by genetics, and actually a paper from last year, so super recently, just split this whole genus into 28 different species. So what we think is here and we think is Aurita is probably not. And there's some indication from some of the research that we were able to do last year that we might have a different one here, Labiata. So I would certainly love to get more of these species and do some more genetic studies on these. Stomalophus meleagris, this one is likely to be Nomura's jellyfish. So meleagris is probably only over in the US, in the Gulf area and coast and that area, whereas it was probably a misidentification here. And the cannonball jellies can get, a little bigger than your head, whereas Nomura's jellyfish can get 2 meters wide. It's a massive, massive jellyfish. It has been in the news because it has flipped fishermen's boats. Their nets catch so many of them and they're so big that it can't pull them in. And so those boats have fallen over. And Nomuras are big enough that they have been known, if somebody gets caught up in them entirely, they have been known to actually kill people. But that's just by sheer volume of stings. Then what was thought to be here, Panopyra, Pelagia panopyra. This is considered a doubtful species, and so it's probably Noctiluca. This species is very infrequently seen in Hong Kong, so it'd be cool to capture a few of these and once again do some more genetics work on those. Other things that are here, so in the upper left and lower right, you've got some of the crystal jellies. These are pretty much earn their name. They won't be big enough to sting you, but you can see they're hard to see. They're see-through, much like on the lower left there. It's a very hard one to see. The comb jellies, and these are typically very see-through. There's 3 species that are recorded here, but there are definitely many, many more that are around. And but they're very hard to see, as you can see up against the backing of those rocks and those shells there. In the upper right is one of the cool ones. This one, Lobonema. And what's cool about these is most jellies on their bell. It's a very smooth part of the bell, no stinging parts. The stinging parts are typically down here towards the tentacles. However, Lobonema on its bell has these little finger-like projections going up. And these finger-like projections are thought to have stinging cells as well. And so this one is one of those that can possibly sting you all over. And then front and center, this one is that Rhopalema hispidum that I talked about earlier, one of those edible ones. This one's super common here in Hong Kong. Also stings a lot of swimmers, but doesn't have quite the same long trailing tentacles that the other jellies will have, like the Cyanea nozakii. This is definitely one that should be recorded here, but isn't currently. And so that's part of the purpose of the project, is to update records. Jellyfish are typically overlooked by scientists. They're not receiving any funding, those kinds of things. Those kind of research projects aren't receiving funding. So records on jellyfish are not very accurate right now. So that's one of the purposes of the project I'm doing. Recent jellyfish discoveries in Hong Kong, super cool stuff here. WWF found a type of box jelly up in Mai Po. So if anybody has been up there, that's a super cool thing. And what's awesome about box jellies, everybody thinks that jellyfish can go everywhere. It's an ocean creature and it can go everywhere. But if you remember how I talked about earlier, they can sense salinity and temperature and pH and those sorts of things. Some of those conditions will help limit the range of jellyfish. So some species will have a range of thousands of kilometers, and some species will have a range that might be about 10 kilometers. And box jellyfish are thought to be one of those species that has a much smaller range. So it's entirely possible that a jellyfish like this could be a Hong Kong species of jellyfish, or a nearby, South China Sea species of jellyfish. And I last heard that they had talked about this with some researchers internationally, and it quite possibly could be a newer species. I don't know where what the outcome of that research is just yet, but it'd be awesome to find out more. Then there was also another species, Anomalorized ashawi, and this is on the side of your screen here. Quite a beautiful looking species with those purple colors and blues. And this was a recent report that showed up in Hoi Ha Wan there. So, different things are being spotted in the waters. It's just a matter of people looking for them and recording them. Stings. So this is where everybody is interested, and this is where most people are concerned about. And not all jellyfish will have stings that can harm you or harm human beings in general. Although there's estimated about 150 million stings annually worldwide, and that's just because more and more people are getting into the water. And jellyfish are in the water, part of the natural part of that environment, and so there are these interactions. Here in Hong Kong, we do not currently have records of species of jellyfish that can kill you. There are species that I mentioned before, Cyanea, Nonstinging, and those that can do a lot of damage, but there aren't ones that can kill you. The hospital authority, the Hong Kong Hospital Authority, does not currently record sting information, but likely most stings are taken care of on site by lifeguards or other people around. The Hong Kong Jellyfish Project is looking to record sting information. So anybody you know gets stung, you can share some of that sting information on the website. I'll talk about that a little later. And one of the project goals here, other places, particularly in Australia, I've done some research pairing jellyfish occurrences with environmental data and have found that in some ways jellyfish can be predictable. So, for example, you might have, here in Hong Kong, you might have an east wind blowing through in April, and therefore on east-facing beach like Lantau's lower Cheung you might have more of those Rhopalema hispidum showing up. This was a trend that happened last year. This kind of thing requires long-term data, so just 1 year's data is not enough. You need to go for several years before this kind of information can make sense. Then once you know these kinds of information, you can find out, are there other places that activities can happen? Can you go inside swim nets, outside swim nets? Swim nets are not the best protection against jellyfish. Some of the jellies are small enough they'll go right through it, but also even with the bigger ones, if they rub up against the net, those tentacles can break off and slide through the net, and those tentacles are still active and can still sting, even though they're separated from the jellyfish. Even stranded jellyfish, their stings can still be active there. And I'll talk about how that works in just a moment here. So you have to be careful. Also, here in Hong Kong, the swim nets don't go all the way to the bottom, so they don't exclude everything. The jellyfish low enough down can certainly go right underneath it. Other places people will cover up. You might have divers that are covered up in our wetsuits. You might have swimmers that use lycra suits, but even that is not 100% protection. There was a news story about a person in Australia who was fully protected dive suit, jumped off a boat, got stung by a jellyfish in the face because that was the unprotected area, spent a couple of days in the hospital. It was one of the more dangerous ones in Australia. So it's entirely possible that even that little bits of exposed skin can expose you to stings. Here's some of the pictures of stings that have been submitted. So you've got the top two stings here. You can see those familiar tentacle patterns, and these are Cyanea Nonstinging patterns, while the bottom one in the center there is likely from the Rhopalema hispidum. So you can see it's not quite that long stinging pattern. And that Rhopalema one, that's actually after healing for a month. So you can see that jellyfish it's entirely possible for jellyfish to do quite a bit of damage to your skin and even over long term. And how they do this is using these stinging sites. So on the long trailing tentacles, there's thousands and thousands of little sites, and each one of these sites will have something like this nematocyst over here. And this is a chamber with a coiled harpoon inside, and a little bit of a trigger. And that trigger can be set off by pressure. It can be set off by changes in pressure, osmotic pressure even, chemical changes, things like this can all trigger this. And so it's very sensitive, and then that shoots out a harpoon and injects toxins in. I've got a little bit of a video here. There might be a little bit of a sound going on, so just be aware of that. But these are some people who, on YouTube, Smarter Every Day, who did some microscopic look at jellyfish stings. So pretty awesome stuff that these guys did, that kind of microscopic videography there. And you could see from the time, I mean, that was in milliseconds. So fewer than 12 milliseconds. I've had people tell me before when they feel something brush up against them, they immediately try and brush it off as fast as they can. And really you can't react in fewer than 12 milliseconds to get away from something. So if you do brush up against it, it's entirely possible that you can get stung. And this last image is pretty cool, being able to see that that jellyfish venom being injected. Whoop. Here we go. So what can you do about this? And this is the big key. I love this cartoon. I think it's hilarious. They totally get misunderstand it purposely. If anybody out there has peed on a jellyfish sting, this is the wrong thing to do, all right? Don't do that. It doesn't work. It's nasty. Urine is a waste product, so now you're putting a bodily waste product into an open wound. Don't do it. It's hilarious. It's funny. It's a popular myth, but don't do it. There's way better things that you can do. And the first thing you can do is to get out of the water. Get away from the stings, get away from getting stung even more. Get away from the jellyfish, onto a boat, onto the shore, whatever you need to do. Then washing the area in seawater. And you want to do it in seawater because that's the water it was just in. Freshwater, remember I said that osmotic pressure can trigger nematocysts. If you use fresh water to try and wash these off, it's entirely possible that you'll trigger more stings and you'll get more toxins into the wounds there. Then you can wash that off with seawater. You can use vinegar solution. This is a popular one that's used, but it doesn't deactivate for all species. And so more research is needed. Remember that phrase, more research is needed on which species it works for and which ones it doesn't. And then you can remove tentacles with tweezers. They used to say hard-edged card, but if you've got a hard-edged object that you're scraping down a wounded area, you might trigger more of these with pressure. And then a hot water soak. Hot water soak as hot as you can handle it. I've heard as high as 40 degrees Celsius, but basically as hot as you can handle it, as long as you can handle it. And that's going to help deactivate some types of venom. And then the Hong Kong Hospital Authority recommends at that point that you just treat the symptoms. If you have pain, take some pain relievers. If you have swelling, you can take some antihistamines, those sorts of things. Don't rub the area, you'll trigger more things. Don't put a pressure bandage on it, you'll trigger more nematocysts. All of these other home remedies don't really work. There is something out there, a lotion that, this is a commercial lotion, Safe Sea lotion. And it was created, scientists took, if you know the clownfish that lives in anemones, then there's a mucus that protects them. And they took this mucus and they analyzed it, and then they helped use that mucus as a way of creating this lotion. So there's a physical barrier, and then they used that lotion as a chemical barrier for these nematocysts as well. So in the lab tests, it was very effective. I've had swimmers here tell me that it's not effective, that it's rubbish, and they still get stung. I'd love to do some further research on that. Once again, more research is needed. So about the Hong Kong Jellyfish Project itself, Hong Kong is a research gap in jellyfish studies. Research in large species is on the mainland up in the Northeast, you got the Yellow Sea, the Bohai, those areas, and internationally. So the west coast of the US and California, you've got Washington State is a big area for jellyfish research. And then the Mediterranean is also one of the biggest areas for jellyfish research in the world because it's a contained area and there's so many countries around it. And it's quite a comparatively shallow area that a lot of research can be done there. But Hong Kong's missing. So this is why I started the Hong Kong Jellyfish Project, so that we can look at jellyfish research here. Hopefully we can record species, maybe even find new species records, examine the environmental conditions, find out if there's a way that we can use this information to enhance the safety of water sports groups, look after swimmers, divers, those sorts, and then maybe even examine some of the blooms and their causes around here. This Hong Kong Jellyfish Project was based on a campaign that was started in the Mediterranean by an Italian professor. And outcomes for that was that they published research articles, they even found new species records and described a new species. So I have a lot of hope that this project is able to do the same. And in fact, hopefully in a week or so, I'll find out if we're going to be able to publish our first article on new species sightings here. I'll talk about that in a second as well. So citizen science, and this is exactly what it sounds like. So citizen science, by Citizen Science Asia, the definition of that is it's about public participation in science for the public good. And this means that anybody can do it. So anybody from 5 years old up to 90 years old can participate in citizen science. And a lot of these projects are data gathering. So there's only one of me. Right now there's 18 people on this talk. And so there's many more of you that could all go out and look for jellyfish. And so what the Hong Kong Jellyfish Project is doing is looking at the presence, abundance, and distribution of jellyfish in Hong Kong's waters. So any of you that see jellyfish, you can take a photo, you can record some simple information like the date, time, where you are, and then submit those observations through the website, through iNaturalist, or even social media on there. And people do that from you don't even have to be a water sports person. Divers are popular, kayakers send a lot of photos, but people send photos from central piers. Just before you take a ferry, take a look over the side, take a photo. One of the coolest ones was someone was taking a gondola car from the Tung Chung Yongping 360 up, left the Tung Chung station, looked down 100 feet in the air, took a photo of jellyfish and sent it to me there. So you can even be flying through the air and still submit jellyfish images. Collaborations with all kinds of organizations out there. So working with some CUHK researchers, one who does genetics research. And so that's why I always encourage people to try and capture jellyfish species so that we can do some of the genetics research and confirm what's here and where and how, as I discussed earlier. And then another researcher, Dr. Falkenberg, who studies disturbed marine ecosystems and their effects there. Work with private companies like Living Oceans. I've talked with the Maritime Museum. When their Marine Discovery Center opens up, maybe I'll be able to do some talks there, exhibitions on jellyfish and some more research on them. I've been able to share some things with some jellyfish, even some species, with the Biodiversity Museum, the Hong Kong Biodiversity Museum. So that's a great resource that everyone should check out. They do tours even online too. WWF was an early supporter there, set up the iNaturalist project for me with Sean Martin. And I reach out to schools and just anybody like yourselves. Everybody here could be a possible contributor to the project. Last year had volunteers coming out doing beach surveys and boat surveys, recording data about sightings. So outreach goes through the website, through the poster. The poster you see on the screen actually just released a brand new poster updated for 2022. You can go to the website and I'll share that information in a second. You can go to the website and download that poster for yourself. You can even print posters out like that, A2 size there. Do outreach to businesses, talks like this one. I've done radio programs. I was in the SCMP as well. So all kinds of outreach. To share some of the data, some of the things that we've gotten here. So you can see on the side of your screen, on the left side of your screen, you can see that over the course of last year, there's a definite seasonal pattern to jellyfish. Early in the spring, more and more of them started being seen. And then just about as summer was starting, if you know how Hong Kong's monsoons work, earlier in spring, we've got that northern monsoon blowing in, and then in the summer, it turns to a southern one. So it switches. You can see right about that time, a whole bunch of jellyfish disappeared. And so this is one of those things that I want to look at over the long term. Was that just last summer, or is that going to be a pattern for every year? Once again, more research is needed. When I was talking with people, divers last year said that there were fewer jellyfish in the water than there had been in previous years. Even beach cleaners told me that there were fewer jellyfish on the beaches compared to last year. So last year might have been an anomaly. It might have been a different year. So once again, more research is needed over longer time periods. And then we can also find out this kind of information on the right side of your screen, just what species are most common. You can see across both platforms, the website and iNaturalist, Cyanea nozakii, most common, Rhopalema, second most common ones, and then others down the line there. So this is kind of important baseline information. Since very few people have studied jellyfish specifically here in Hong Kong, this is going to be baseline trends that we can build on for further research. Some new species records. So we've got on the left side screen, we've got Netrostoma. And this is a new species record for Hong Kong. So citizen scientists submitted these images, and you got their names right there on the screen there. And then these are two species that the article that I'm hoping to get published, hopefully I'll hear about that in a week, like I said before. And so this would be a perfect output for the Hong Kong Jellyfish Project, having citizen science report these species, and then we can add these species to the scientific literature and contribute that way, updating records. Netrostoma on the left, and then on the right, we've got Thysanostoma. And both of these not frequently seen here in Hong Kong, so great sightings and beautiful jellies. Future directions. So like I said, this is baseline information, hoping to find out more about what we know here. Left side, we've got that Acromitis, the river jellyfish. Last year, they bloomed in 3 specific locations. So they were right outside in Sai Kung Bay. They were right in there. They were also right near Tai Mei Tuk. And then a bloom was over on Pak Nai area, on Pearl River Delta area. And they were reported there, those 3 locations, but they were reported only in those locations. So there's some kind of population, some kind of bloom going on there. It's entirely possible that they might have polyps laid there. It would be great to go find those. Also, Craspidocuspa sourbeet. This one is a freshwater jellyfish. So that's what's something that's really super cool. Jellies are not only in saltwater, they're also in freshwater. And stuff like Craspidocuspa has been reported in Hong Kong reservoirs, but I would love to get video. I would love to capture some of these species. So if any of you are out hiking and you look down into the water and you see, and it's a very small jellyfish. It's only you know, 2.5 centimeters wide. So if you see them pulsing, you know, that would be a great report to have. I'd love to update records about those here. It's entirely possible that, you know, there's maybe 12 species of Craspidocuspa, and this is originally a Chinese jellyfish that is now invasive across the world. So it'd be great to find out what's here. And then Aurelia in that lower right, if you remember, Aurelia has been split up by genetics. And so it'd be great to capture some more of these, do some of those genetic studies with some of the lab collaborators that I've managed to work with, and find out what exactly is really here. Like I said, maybe it's labiata, but we need more research. So what can you do? You know, you all are citizen scientists. There's more of you than one of me. You're the eyes and ears of the scientific community. So when you're out and about, if you see a jellyfish, you know, take a photo, send it to me, submit it through the website, submit it through social media, anything like that. All of those ways are great ways to learn about jellies. Might be something that you see all the time. That's great. I would love to hear about it. I was just out looking into the harbor. I saw 30 Cyanea nozakii. I still want to know about that, even no matter how common they are. And then you might see a species like Thysanostoma here, which rarely seen, and that's a great one to learn about as well. If any of you are comfortable, capturing these species, like I just take Ziploc bags. I grabbed one of these cyanids in a Ziploc bag, sealed it up, and then, you just be careful to avoid some of the tentacles. You choose a small enough one, and then give me a ring. I'll be happy to come up and pick up captured species. I've got some divers who are doing that, who are contributing that way, and it's awesome to have them doing that. Other things you can do, this is a personal passion project. I'm not a charity, I'm not a NGO, so it's all just personally funded. So if you know any funds out there, anybody with money who loves jellyfish, put them in touch with me. I'd love to get some supports like those. And then also having people out doing beach and ferry surveys. Right now, we're all under coronavirus restrictions, so these kinds of things might not be possible or it might be difficult to do. But later in the year as well, as these restrictions lift and we get back to more normal lives, it'd be great to go out and get these kinds of information. So here's some of the sources or resources you can get onto the website here and share your sighting. You can report your sting, as I talked about before. Also on the website, there is sting information, so sting treatment information, much like you've seen here today. So that could be shared with the general public as well. And then there's iNaturalist, and I strongly recommend if you don't know what iNaturalist is, to check it out. It's a great biodiversity app, and you can download it on your phone, take photos of just about anything, any kind of animal. The artificial intelligence there might recommend something, but then that information goes out and it's available to anybody across the entire world who has this app. So you could get people, scientists from the other side of the world who might see your species and tell you what it is, or you might be a community of people here as well that can contribute. So a great biodiversity app. Anybody can use it. It's great for kids to get people really super excited about nature. And then down on the bottom, you can see some of the contacts. So the website, hkjellyfish.com, and then the iNaturalist project as well, in which you can share some of your sightings. So with that, thank you very much for listening to me today, and thanks, hopefully, participating. And at this point, I'll definitely take any questions. It looks like there might be some questions here in the chat as well, so we'll take a look at that. But if you'd like,
thank you. Thank you for the talk. I put the questions, I summarized them and put it in the chat box. So John, you can take a look. I will answer the 6th question because I know about that question. So okay. I think Ida asked, is the Hong Kong Biodiversity Museum open to the public? It is definitely open to the public when it's not social distancing the regulation. They have public tours, but they do get, they're very popular, and I think you need to fight for a space. But Encompass has been organizing some tours as well. And I think if you get a group of people, if you want to message me, I can help you to arrange it as well. But right now the museum cannot do any physical tour, and they have been doing some online talk as well. And there's an online talk which I put it on the chat room that we'll be doing with the Biodiversity Museum on next Tuesday evening with the director Benoit. And again, all our community talks are free by donation only. So yeah. Now I will leave John to answer question 1 to 5, which I don't know the answer. Oh.
All right. So yeah, thanks for everybody putting your questions into the chat here. Let's start at the top. And yeah, it looked like Benita, looked like you answered this first one. So jellyfish do not have brains. They don't have brains at all, but they do have. They're called nerve nets. So much like our nerves, we feel things. Jellyfish have overlapping nerve nets. So some of them are used for movement, some of them for senses, and some for moving things around within their bodies. So they have these 3 overlapping nerve nets, but no central, no brain, no central nervous system like we do. So they're quite simple, but capable and complex. And then why do they have different colors? Does it relate to UV? So the coloration would be similar to like us, any kind of coloration, these different species. I mean, there is that one species that I talked about, Mastigius, that has the symbiotic algae in it that would have those different colors based on the algae. Other than that, it would just be like us having different colors between species and things. And then prudence, yeah, if they sense danger, how can they escape? And they move with the water. So jellies, people think that jellies are subject to the water, and wherever the water moves, they have to move with it. And this is not quite correct, especially for the bigger ones. They can fight some of these currents. So, like 1 or 2 K per hour kind of current, these jellies can move against it. Also, jellies, sometimes, in very deep water, you might have a current going this way up top and a current going this way down below. So jellies will go up into this current and move this way, and then they might dive and they go into a different current and move a different way. So they can actually manipulate their environment that way, or I should say move through their environment that way and escape danger. So even if you're out, there was somebody who told me they're paddling with a swim group. So the swimmers are behind and this kayaker is up in front of them. The kayaker is moving ahead. And when the kayaker saw jellyfish, he just tap it with his paddle. And he tapped it with the paddle, and then the jellyfish would just dive. So this is our way of escaping, is typically they will dive. So if you capture a jellyfish in a bag or a bucket, you'll see it go to the bottom and pulse because it's trying to dive deep. So he would protect the swimmers, and it doesn't take much. He just tap it gently with the paddle and not trying to damage it, but it would just startle it and it would dive down below, and then the swimmers could pass over safely. So that's how they typically try and escape. And then, so crystal, excuse me, crystal jellies. Crystal jellies, this is a common name for them. The scientific name is Aquaria. And they probably just got that name just because they're see-through, and so crystal-like, shiny like that in the wet. And then, have they evolved after so many thousands of years in terms of shape and organs and things? You can see that the shape is quite similar. It's really hard to tell because as a soft-bodied creature, it's very uncommon. It's pretty rare to get jellyfish fossils. So we really don't have that much to compare it to. Scientists have gotten really lucky in finding some of these really old fossils. So it's really hard to say if they've evolved that way, especially with stuff like organs and that. We kind of get those impressions and shapes. So that would be one of those questions where I'd say more research is needed, but it would be really hard to find out how. What is the giant jellyfish commonly washed up on Lantau beaches? That one is highly likely to be Rhopalema hispidum. Those, when I go out and do beach surveys, I've measured them to about 70 centimeters. People this year have submitted photos 90 centimeters, close to a meter, so even bigger this year. And a lot of times it's quite a thick skin. They've been washing up in pretty good condition based on some of the photos, but it's probably Rhopalema. And then the most poisonous jelly, based on stings and things, probably that Cyanea nozakii, and that is likely because the tentacles are so long, and so the more tentacles that hit you, the more toxin that will go into you. And so based on the length of those tentacles, they can do quite a lot of damage if a lot of the sting gets onto you. And one of the worst stings that was reported to me was a young girl who got dragged through Cyanea on a junk boat trip, having fun. Jellyfish got dragged through it. Her legs looked like she had been whipped. She spent several days in hospital, couldn't walk straight for a week or two, had damage a month later. Like it was quite intense. So yeah, that's probably one of those, just based on sheer tentacles. There might be other jellyfish that could do more specific damage, but people aren't getting hit by them. Somebody did report possibly a box jellyfish on a deep water dive. I would love to get more information about that and see if it is passing through, is it around, is it out there, what species was it specifically? So this is one of those more research is needed kind of questions. Once jellyfish is washed up, does it die immediately? Should you try and push it back into the water? A lot of times when a jellyfish is washed up onto the shore, it's probably dead or dying. If it's not storms or the like anyway. So like a storm could certainly do, churning that water, pushing them up. I know last April, I did a beach survey on Lantau, and one of the swim nets towards the end of Lower Cheung had, I think it was over 200 jellyfish caught in it. And that's just because the storm had pushed all of them onto the shore. So they're pretty dead. In calmer conditions, a jellyfish that can't avoid the shore is probably dead or dying anyway. It's unlikely that they're lasting too long. Also, jellyfish don't live that long. You might have 6 months, you might have a year-long life cycle, and then they're done. Some of them can last longer, especially in captivity. They might last up to 2 years, depending on species. But if they wash up on the shore, they're probably dead or dying. So, and there's so many of them, I wouldn't worry too much about it. If you want to do something for a good deed, you can try to push them back in, but then you would expose yourself to possibly being stung. Remember, their tentacles can still sting, even though that jelly might be dead or dying on the beach, their tentacles can still sting. So I wouldn't recommend it, but if you feel like doing your good deed for the day, you can try. And then, yep, it looks like we got most of that.
One more question, John. I got a question. Do we have non-poisonous jellyfish?
So all jellyfish will have some kind of sting. The only question is whether you can feel it. So stuff like the crystal jellyfish that I mentioned earlier, there was that one you saw, there were long tentacles off of it, the Macrodactyla. So you won't feel that at all. Your skin won't feel it at all, but some of the smaller plankton would certainly feel it and would be caught up by that. Then you get to the moon jelly, the one with the 4 ovals on it. Most people don't feel the sting of that. Some people might feel a little bit of a rash, a little bit of an irritation, and then all the way up to something like Cyanea, where you would get quite a lot of stinging, a lot of damage to that. So yeah, there's a whole range of things. There are species out there considered, and some of this might be a definition thing. So the definition of jellyfish can change depending on who you're talking to, and there's not really a set one. I like to make it a broader one, so any kind of gelatinous organism out there could be, with any kind of bell, could be considered jellyfish. So you might get some of the hydroids, like Porpita, these blue ones. You might get the comb jellies, and this one has no sting. So the comb jellies, they can be good size like this, and they basically look like a pouch. And they eat just by enveloping things into their open stomach area and hanging onto them and dissolving them, versus other things that would sting with the tentacles and draw it into the mouth area or into the cavity, really. So with that definition of jellyfish, then yeah, there would definitely be some non-stinging jellyfish.
And one more question: why are you so interested in jellyfish, John?
Yeah, that's a good one. It's one of those things that when you look at them, and most people immediately go like, oh, like don't touch, it'll sting me. But then when you start learning a little bit more, and that's the entire purpose of tonight's talk, is I'm hoping that I've been able to share some more information with you so that when you look at it, you're like, wow, that is awesome. I know something that's been around for longer than the dinosaurs, or I know that species might not sting me. So maybe I can touch it on the bell and learn something more about it. And there's so much variety in jellyfish as well. So these species, they can look so different. The colors can be so different. There's so much. And there's so much that we don't know about them. So, I'm just some guy who decided to look into them and start a website and ask people to look for them. And because we don't know so much about them, even somebody like me can contribute to the knowledge of jellyfish. And so that's why I started the project. And then hopefully I'll be able to share that jellyfish excitement with all of you.
So I have a question for you, John. Which is your favorite jellyfish?
I don't know. Like at this point, because I get, I don't really have a favorite, but I get excited about a lot of them, especially, like something like cyanea, people send lots of photos of those, but you might get a really beautiful photo of one and you're like, wow, that is a really beautiful species right there. That's a beautiful individual cyanea. Or then somebody might send us a photo like that Thysanostoma that I mentioned before, the one that was in the article, the purple bell and long tentacles there. And you're like, wow, like objectively colorful and amazing like that. And there's so much variety in the shapes too. So it's almost like a puzzle sometimes to figure out what they are. Somebody might send in something that you've never seen before, and then you have to do some research into the Atlas of Jellyfish, or there's tons of resources on the internet. I've also added resources on the Hong Kong Jellyfish website, so you can go there, look under the more information blank, and you can do jellyfish research as well.
There's a question for you, John, in the chat room. Whether you can do a book and a talk targeted more at kids.
Yeah. So definitely, I've thought about something like a booklet, pamphlet, information like that. Some of it is, I could certainly do that and start some of that process now. Some of it, maybe 2-3 years, might even discover more species here and then could update some of those. But yeah, I've definitely done that. We did a participation survey at the end of last year, and a lot of people were interested in a booklet or a pamphlet about Hong Kong jellyfish. And especially with our information on our records, it would be a great way of updating things. I would certainly look into that, but that's a lot of work, so it'll take a lot of time. I couldn't do that by next week, next month or something. But that would certainly be a great goal to have for this year. I'd love to do it.
And another talk for kids. We have a lot of students today here.
Yeah, it's great having such young people here learning about jellies, and I would love to do these kinds of things in person. So a couple of months back, I was able to do a talk for the Royal Geographical Society, and coincidentally that afternoon, somebody had caught a jellyfish for me, and so. A friend of mine picked that jellyfish up and was able to bring it to the talk. And so while I was talking, there was a jellyfish on the table, and then people were coming up, and kids were at that talk and came up and were able to touch it. So that would be a great way of doing a presentation with kids, and some more interactive and touch kinds of things. I'd love to do that. If we can get past this, COVID restrictions and things.
Thank you. Any more questions from the group?
Yeah. Okay. Well, if even if you head away and you think of a question on the Hong Kong Jellyfish website, there is a comment box towards the bottom, and you can just write me a message and just ask me any questions. If you see a jellyfish, go to that share a sighting page, and then you can just put in some basic information. Don't need much. You can just take a photo, tell me when, tell me where, and that's enough to give me some great information. So, happy hunting. I hope you find some. And like I said, if you have questions, feel free to reach out.